Imagine waking up one morning to a peaceful view of your neighborhood, only to be confronted with an unexpected letter that shakes you to the core. That's what happened to me. I had spent months researching and investing in solar panels, excited about the future and the positive impact it would have on both my electric bill and the environment. Little did I know, this simple step toward sustainability would launch me into a massive battle with my HOA, one I never anticipated. It all started when my family and I decided to go green. We had been living in our home for nearly 10 years, and as the world moved towards cleaner energy, I thought it was the right time to make a change. I knew that solar panels could save us money, reduce our carbon footprint, and align our home with the global push for sustainability. With rising energy costs and concerns about the environment, I felt like I was making the responsible choice for my family and the planet. After consulting with solar companies and choosing the best option for our home, the installation process began. The crew was professional, and within a few days, the panels were up, ready to harness the sun's energy. I was ecstatic. My home was now a part of the growing green energy movement. But what I didn't expect was the storm that was about to hit. A few weeks after the installation, I received a formal letter from the HOA. The subject: violation of community guidelines. I felt my stomach drop. As I read through the letter, I saw that the HOA was not happy about the solar panels I had installed on my roof. They claimed that my home was in violation of the HOA's rules, which prohibited certain modifications to the exterior of homes without prior approval. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding. Surely, they couldn't be serious about a small improvement like solar panels, right? But the letter wasn't just a simple warning. It was a demand: remove the panels or face fines. My heart sank. This wasn't just about some aesthetic rule. This was about my family's future and the steps I had taken to improve our energy efficiency. I quickly called the HOA office, and what I was told only added fuel to the fire. The representative on the phone explained that our community CC and RS covenants, conditions, and restrictions prohibited the installation of any energy-related equipment on rooftops without HOA approval. I was stunned. This was a standard rule, they explained, meant to preserve the neighborhood's appearance and maintain uniformity. Solar panels, apparently, didn't fit that image. But what I didn't understand was why this was an issue. It was 2025. Everyone was talking about clean energy and the future of renewable resources. Solar panels were becoming more common by the day. Yet, my HOA was treating it like some kind of crime. I hung up the phone and immediately began researching the matter further. It didn't take long for me to discover that my house was actually part of a government-backed clean energy program. My home was eligible for incentives through a national initiative designed to help homeowners make the switch to renewable energy. I was part of the solution to a global crisis, and here the HOA was, trying to turn me into the problem. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't just fighting for my home's energy future. I was fighting against an outdated system that didn't even understand the importance of clean energy. I felt a surge of determination. There had to be a way to resolve this, and I wasn't going to back down. I decided to take a stand. I began by gathering all the documentation I could find regarding the government's clean energy program. I reached out to the solar company for information on the legal aspects of solar panel installation. They were supportive, telling me that my installation had been done according to all local laws and regulations. In fact, they informed me that my solar panels were eligible for a special tax credit, which further validated my decision. With my newfound knowledge in hand, I began preparing for my next move. I knew I had to appeal to the HOA's sense of responsibility. After all, this wasn't just about me. It was about the future of the community. I wanted to show the HOA that this wasn't some random act of defiance. I was trying to help the environment, reduce my energy consumption, and take part in a program that benefited everyone. Before I could write my appeal, I decided to check the HOA's guidelines one more time. I wanted to be sure I hadn't missed something important. That's when I stumbled upon a surprising detail. Hidden in the fine print was a clause that stated, "Homeowners are encouraged to participate in energy-saving programs and may request approval for solar panel installation through proper channels." Wait a minute. This wasn't some outright ban on solar panels. There was an approval process. but it seemed as though the HOA had simply never bothered to update its guidelines to reflect modern energy policies. My suspicion grew. The HOA had the opportunity to embrace clean energy, but chose to ignore it instead. The discovery of the hidden clause was a game changer. It gave me a glimmer of hope that I could resolve this conflict without having to remove the solar panels, as the HOA's stance wasn't as rigid as it initially seemed. There was a pathway for approval. The problem was that they hadn't modernized their guidelines to keep pace with the current environmental realities. This was something I could work with. I spent the next few days drafting a formal appeal letter to the HOA. In it, I explained my situation in detail, my home's participation in the government's clean energy program, the legal aspects of the solar panel installation, and my intent to contribute to the community's sustainability efforts. I attached the documentation from both the solar company and the government's energy initiative, along with copies of the relevant sections of the HOA guidelines. In the letter, I also requested a formal meeting with the HOA board, offering to explain my case in person. I was determined to show them that this wasn't just some fleeting trend. It was the future, and it was something that every responsible homeowner and community member should embrace. Once I submitted the letter, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. Would they listen? Would they even care? Or was I just a small fish in a big pond, about to be eaten by the bureaucratic machine? Days passed, and I didn't hear back from the HOA. I continued to monitor my solar panels, watching the energy savings add up while feeling the pressure mounting. Finally, I got an email from the HOA office requesting a meeting with me the following week. It was a small victory. At least they were willing to engage. The meeting day arrived, and I went in fully prepared. I had my documents organized and a clear presentation of the benefits of solar energy. I even reached out to a local environmental expert who could vouch for the importance of residential solar energy. If the HOA wasn't going to embrace solar, I was going to make it impossible for them to ignore it. As I sat in the HOA conference room, I could feel the tension. There were 4 members of the board present, each one more stoic than the last. The meeting began with a few pleasantries before the board member who had sent the initial letter to me took the floor. "We've reviewed your request and the documents you've submitted. However, as you know, our community guidelines are in place for a reason," he started, his tone already defensive. I couldn't help but notice the lack of real enthusiasm for this issue. It felt as though they were trying to brush it aside, as if my small solar panel project was a nuisance to them, not something that could change the neighborhood for the better. "Can you explain why you didn't seek prior approval for the installation?" another board member asked, her arms crossed over her chest. It was clear she wasn't convinced by my argument yet. I took a deep breath and began to speak. The guidelines don't outright ban solar panels. They merely require approval, which I was unaware of at the time. When I read your guidelines more closely, I realized that it was something that should have been done through proper channels. But I was also under the impression that my home was part of a government clean energy program, which could make a significant difference for all of us. The board members exchanged skeptical glances. It was clear they weren't expecting a response like this. One of them, a man I hadn't yet met, spoke up. "But this still goes against the aesthetics of the neighborhood. We don't want to turn our community into a series of houses with solar panels on the roof. We want to preserve the look and feel of the neighborhood." I responded quickly. I completely understand concern about aesthetics. That's why I made sure the panels were installed in a way that minimizes their visibility from the street. Solar panels can be a part of modern architecture without compromising the look of our homes. It was then that the environmental expert I had brought with me spoke. "Actually, studies show that homes with solar panels tend to increase in value over time. Not only is it a smart financial move, but it also boosts the neighborhood's reputation as an eco-friendly community. And let's not forget that more and more cities are embracing clean energy. This isn't a trend, it's the future." For a moment, the room went quiet. The board members were listening now, their eyes fixed on the expert. It was clear that the tide was beginning to turn. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I also knew the battle wasn't over. After a few more minutes of back and forth, the meeting adjourned, and the board promised to review the request again and get back to me within a week. As I left the room, I felt a glimmer of optimism. Maybe this wasn't going to be as hard as I thought. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around. As I settled into my new routine, with the solar panel secured and functioning, I began to think about the wider implications of this experience. While I had successfully navigated the storm with the HOA, there were still so many people who hadn't taken the step toward solar energy, and the roadblocks they faced were much like mine. I realized that my battle wasn't just about my own house. It was about all the homeowners in my community who could be benefiting from sustainable energy, but hadn't yet found the courage to push back against outdated rules. I started talking to my neighbors, many of whom had expressed interest in solar energy, but were hesitant to move forward due to the HOA's restrictions. They were worried about fines or worse, the potential for being forced to remove their panels, like I had been initially threatened. What I didn't realize was that my struggle had opened the door for others to speak up. It became clear that if we were going to shift the mentality of our community, it would require more than just individual action. It would require collective effort. Inspired by the success of my appeal, I organized a neighborhood meeting. I invited homeowners who were already interested in solar power and those who were just starting to think about it. I contacted the solar installation company that had worked with me and asked them to give a presentation on the benefits of going solar. I also reached out to local environmental experts to discuss the positive environmental impact and the long-term financial savings of solar panels. If I could show people the broader picture, then maybe, just maybe, we could change the way the entire neighborhood viewed solar energy. The meeting was held at the community center, and to my surprise, it was packed. People were genuinely curious and excited. They wanted to learn more. They asked questions about the installation process, how much it would cost, and whether there were any financial incentives they could take advantage of. It felt like a movement was starting, one that would bring about real change in the neighborhood. I shared my personal story about how the HOA had initially tried to stop me from installing solar panels and how I had fought back by using the information I had gathered about government programs and sustainable energy initiatives. I explained how solar power had not only lowered my energy bills, but also made me feel like I was contributing to a much larger cause, the fight against climate change. I told them that if we all worked together, we could not only make our neighborhood more sustainable, but also encourage the HOA to embrace the future rather than hold on to outdated, restrictive guidelines. As the meeting went on, the conversation shifted toward the HOA itself. Many of my neighbors expressed frustration over the lack of progress on issues like clean energy and the reluctance of the board to adapt to modern standards. One neighbor, a retired engineer, raised a valid point. This is 2025. How can an HOA be so far behind in recognizing the importance of sustainable energy? What happens when the city and government start mandating these changes? Are we going to be left behind? I couldn't help but agree with him. It was a valid concern. Many cities and states were already adopting policies that encourage solar power and clean energy, offering tax credits, rebates, and other incentives. It was clear that the HOA's outdated stance was only holding us back. If they didn't start embracing change, we would eventually be left with a neighborhood that was lagging behind in terms of sustainability and environmental responsibility. That night, I couldn't shake the thought of what could be accomplished if we were able to work together as a community. I realized that we needed a more formal approach. I decided to form a small committee within the neighborhood to advocate for cleaner energy policies with the HOA. I contacted those who had attended the meeting and asked them to join the committee. And to my surprise, almost everyone agreed. The goal was simple: to get the HOA to revise its rules and guidelines regarding solar panels and clean energy initiatives. The first task was to draft a petition, a formal request for the HOA to update its guidelines to allow solar panel installations without the cumbersome approval process. This petition would outline the environmental and economic benefits of solar energy, showing that modernizing the rules was in the best interest of the community. We also planned to submit a proposal for a set of new guidelines that would accommodate not just solar panels, but other energy-efficient modifications, such as energy-efficient windows and electric vehicle charging stations. Over the next few weeks, our committee met regularly, working through the details of our proposal. We gathered signatures from neighbors who were in favor of the changes, and we worked on compiling data to present to the HOA board. The process was time-consuming but necessary. We needed to make a strong case, one that could not be ignored. One of the most surprising things that came out of this effort was the level of support we received from some members of the HOA board. When we reached out to them, they agreed to sit down with us and listen to our concerns. It seemed that, while they were still hesitant about fully embracing solar energy, they were willing to listen to the community's needs. This was a big step in the right direction. As we prepared to present our petition to the board, I realized that this was bigger than just a personal victory. This was about changing the culture of our community, about showing that we could be responsible stewards of the environment while also respecting the aesthetic and historical value of our neighborhood. It was about finding a way to balance progress with tradition. The day of the presentation came, and our committee was ready. We walked into the HOA meeting room with our proposal in hand, determined to make our voices heard. There was no turning back now. If you found this story inspiring, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the HOA Files for more incredible stories like this. Share it with your friends and family, and let's keep pushing for change in our communities. Together, we can make a difference.